I'm Ruth Walker, and tonight my family decided I don't exist. At 2:00 a.m., my screen filled with a message from my son. Daniel, we've all agreed you're no longer part of the family. Don't come to any gatherings. Madeline, my daughter-in-law, tapped a cheerful like beneath it. I took a breath. I felt the floor steady and typed back, "Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments." I set the phone down, the way a surgeon sets a scalpel after the first cut. For one clean minute, nothing happened. Then the group chat detonated into pings and pleas. By midnight, I had 100 missed calls, and my mailbox was stuffed with apologies that sounded like invoices. I didn't answer. If they could erase me with a sentence, I could erase their comfort with a keystroke. It felt less like revenge and more like proper accounting. I sat in my Oregon living room, the clock ticking like a metronome for a new life. Steam curled off black coffee while the porch light burned against the quiet street. I watched it glow and thought about boundaries that arrived too late to be polite. For years, I subsidized their peace and called it love. I funded emergencies that kept repeating until they looked like habits. I paid for second chances that turned into expectations. When people say family, they rarely mean the person footing the bill. Daniel chose his line in a text, and Madeline smiled at my exile. I chose mine in numbers. Simple and final. Mortgage. Car. Phones. Cards, each switch slid to off. The house stayed still as the phone buzzed. I let the night do the talking for me. In the morning, they would come knocking, and I would open the door to my own rules. At last, 3 weeks before that message, I stood in Daniel and Madeline's backyard, setting up tables for my grandson, Tyler's graduation party. I'd paid the caterer $2,400 because Daniel said his son deserved something classy. Madeline had asked me to wear a light blue dress that would photograph better for her social media posts. I told myself it was family pride, not production value. The yard looked beautiful, white lights strung between trees, gold and navy ribbons tied to every chair. Daniel worked the grill while Madeline barked orders into her phone, commanding neighbors and vendors with polished charm. When I arrived, Daniel barely looked up, just pointed toward the drinks table. I smiled, took my place, and started arranging bottles by color, pretending that being useful still meant being included. Guests poured in by noon, filling the space with laughter and the kind of noise that hides tension. I stood by the coolers, pouring lemonade, while people congratulated Madeline on what a wonderful celebration she'd hosted. She accepted every compliment like an actress taking a bow. No one mentioned the woman who'd paid for it all. I refilled ice and smiled until my face ached. When Tyler opened his gifts, I lingered at the edge of the patio. My envelope held a $500 Best Buy card, practical, thoughtful. He opened it, said thanks, Grandma Ruth, and tossed it aside without a second glance. The laughter around him swallowed the moment, and I felt myself disappear, one polite shrug at a time. Madeline's voice rose over the crowd when she began her toast. She thanked the teachers, the coaches, the friends, even Daniel's boss for supporting their family through the years. Every word sounded like a polished press release. My name never crossed her lips. I tried to swallow the sting, until I heard her whisper to her sister by the dessert table, "Mom helps sometimes." Nothing major. My breath caught. Nothing major. 3 years of mortgage payments, private tutors, sports gear, all reduced to sometimes. I placed the pitcher down quietly and slipped out through the side gate. No one noticed. They were too busy smiling for photos. That was the day I understood the truth. I wasn't family. I was funding. The night after the graduation party, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop. My finger hovered over the bank portal like it was a trigger. Every payment that had once kept their lives afloat glowed on the screen: mortgage, car, phones, credit cards. I canceled them one by one, each click cleaner than any apology I'd ever received. The silence afterward felt strange, almost holy. No anger, no regret, just the quiet satisfaction of a woman finally ending her own captivity. I wasn't cutting them off, I was cutting myself free. Outside, the Oregon rain started to fall, steady and approving. By morning, my phone had exploded. 47 missed calls, 73 messages. The family group chat, once used for birthday reminders and baby pictures, had turned into a battlefield of panic. They wanted explanations, negotiations, forgiveness. But what they really wanted was the money. When the doorbell rang at 7 a.m., I already knew who it was. Daniel stood there, red-faced, with Madeline behind him, arms crossed tight like armor. They looked exhausted, desperate, and suddenly very mortal. I opened the door just wide enough for them to see I wasn't shaking. Daniel's voice cracked as he spoke, asking what I'd done. Madeline's tone was sharper, accusing me of being irrational, cruel, even vindictive. I poured myself coffee, calm and deliberate, and said the only thing that mattered. You wanted boundaries? You got them. The words landed like a closing statement. For years, they'd lived off my silence and my guilt. Now they would live with consequences. As they stood in my doorway, faces pale with disbelief, I realized something powerful. They had erased me with a sentence, and I had erased their safety net with a single night's decision. Daniel dropped into a kitchen chair like a man watching his life collapse in real time. He tried to explain that his construction company was behind on payments, that the mortgage was due the next day. Madeline couldn't, furious, saying I couldn't just pull the rug out without warning. I stirred my coffee slowly and told them adults make arrangements when money stops flowing, children throw tantrums. Madeline's voice cracked into something sharp, accusing me of ruining their stability, their home, their son's future. I let her talk herself breathless before answering. I'm not ruining anything, I said. I'm just no longer underwriting your bad decisions. Daniel looked away, shame flickering and dying behind his eyes. They sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the refrigerator. And for once, they had to listen. I'd kept their lives comfortable for so long that discomfort felt like cruelty to them. Every unpaid bill now carried my name in invisible ink. And that truth scared them more than any eviction notice. Boundaries, I was learning, always come with a price tag, paid by those who never thought they'd have to. Madeline tried one last tactic, lowering her voice into false sweetness. You'll regret this, Ruth. When Tyler can't pay for college, when the bank takes our house, you'll regret it. I smiled faintly. Regret was something I'd already spent enough on. Regret is for people still waiting for approval. I said, I'm done waiting. When they finally left, the air felt clean again. Their car backed down the driveway like a retreating storm. I sat with my cooling coffee, adding numbers in my head, and realized how much of my freedom I'd already bought back. For the first time in years, my balance sheet finally made sense. A week passed before the next blow arrived. The letter came by certified mail, thick with legal paper and arrogance. Inside, I found words that made me laugh out loud in disbelief. Daniel and Madeline were suing me. The claim accused me of elder financial abuse, alleging that by cutting off support I'd caused them emotional and financial distress. I read it twice, then set it beside my teacup. They'd erased me, taken my money, and now they were trying to paint me as the abuser. It was absurd and cruel, but also predictable. People who depend on your generosity will always call it cruelty when you stop. I called Patricia Morse, a family law attorney I'd known from my accounting days. Her calm voice cut through the fog of disbelief. "They've made a serious mistake," she said. "By filing this, they've admitted financial dependence. We'll counterclaim for exploitation." For the first time, someone else saw what I'd lived with for years, a pattern of quiet manipulation dressed as love. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Tyler. He sounded frightened, torn between loyalty and truth. He'd overheard his parents talking to their lawyer, coaching him on what to say if questioned. They wanted him to suggest I was confused, even unstable, that my decisions were signs of mental decline. My stomach turned cold as stone. I told him gently he didn't owe anyone a lie, not even his parents. He went silent for a long moment before whispering, "They're going too far. Grandma, I can't protect them anymore." When we hung up, I stared at the stack of papers on my table. Each page, a record of betrayal. They thought they could strip me of dignity by questioning my mind. They didn't understand they'd just given me the perfect weapon, the truth, written in their own signatures. That night, I poured another cup of tea and began organizing every receipt, every transfer, every proof of what I'd endured. They wanted war. I would give them documentation. Patricia and I met in her downtown office, walls lined with case files and quiet confidence. She slid a folder across the table filled with statements, transfers, and receipts. Every dollar I'd sent, every automatic payment I'd made, was there in black and white. "This isn't generosity, Ruth," she said softly. "This is evidence of exploitation." We spent hours building my counterclaim. She explained how each transaction formed a trail, a map of dependency that Daniel and Madeline had created and maintained. I remembered every emergency call, every apology, every promise to pay it back soon. The pattern was clear. Now they hadn't needed help. They'd needed control. Patricia requested bank authorizations and credit card logs. When the statements arrived, she raised an eyebrow. "Your son's business card has charges for a casino weekend and golf memberships," she said. "Looks like they've been funding luxury with your accounts." The realization burned through me, not as rage, but as clarity. I'd been underwriting their lifestyle, while they rehearsed speeches about my supposed decline. By the end of that week, Patricia had drafted the countersuit financial exploitation, emocional coerción, and fraud. I read every word carefully before signing my name. Me hands didn't shake. This wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping with consequences. When the papers were filed, I walked out of the courthouse into crisp Oregon air. The morning sun hit the marble steps, sharp and clean. And for the first time in years, I felt the same way. They had fired the first shot, but I was the one holding documentation and discipline. Power, it turned out, didn't roar. It signed forms quietly, then watched the storm roll the other way. The mediation took place in a beige conference room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and tension. Daniel and Madeline sat across from me with their lawyer, a thin man who kept shuffling papers as if they might save him. Patricia was beside me, calm and precise, her briefcase a quiet threat. I could feel my heart beat steady, not from fear, but from certainty. The mediator, a gray-haired woman named Dr. N.D. Blackwood, opened with the usual talk about good faith and resolution. Daniel tried to sound reasonable, claiming this was all a misunderstanding. A family argument blown out of proportion. Madeline nodded at every word. Playing the role of wounded daughter-in-law, I waited until their performance ended before placing my stack of financial statements on the table. Patricia spoke for me, reading their group chat message aloud. "We've all agreed you're no longer part of the family." The words hung in the air. Impossible to deny. The mediator's expression shifted from polite neutrality to disbelief. "And you filed an abuse claim against her after sending this?" she asked. Madeline looked down, her practiced calm unraveling. Daniel's voice cracked as he insisted they never forced me to pay for anything. Patricia countered smoothly, pointing to the bank transfers labeled "Mom Urgent." Each entry was dated, signed, and undisputed. "Dr. Blackwood finally said what I'd known all along: withdrawing financial support is not abuse, it's setting boundaries." By the end of the session, their side offered a weak apology and a laughable settlement. Patricia declined on my behalf. When we walked out, she smiled slightly and said, "They know they've lost." I looked back at the conference room, at two people who had built comfort on manipulation, and felt something close to peace. Power didn't shout that day, it documented. 2 months after the mediation, I received the news from Patricia's office. Madeline had filed for divorce. She blamed Daniel entirely, claiming he'd misled her, that she was just a wife trying to hold a fractured family together. The court filings painted her as the victim of his poor judgment. It was a clever move, one that let her distance herself from the fallout of our case. Daniel came to see me a week later, looking 10 years older. His voice was low, stripped of the arrogance I'd once recognized in him. He said Madeline had moved out, taking their joint accounts and most of the furniture. All that remained was a mountain of debt and a trail of lies. He confessed things I hadn't asked to hear: how Madeline had orchestrated everything from the start, how she'd encouraged the lawsuit, how she'd used him as the face of her greed. She'd done it before, in other states, under different names, always targeting older relatives or wealthy employers. Each story followed the same pattern: charm, dependency, and eventual ruin. My son had simply been her latest collaborator and her most convenient shield. I listened without interruption. Part of me wanted to feel pity, but another part knew he'd allowed it. "You became her weapon, Daniel," I said quietly. He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Regret had arrived too late to repair anything. Later that night, Tyler called to tell me he'd been digging through court records for a college project. He'd found proof of Madeline's past: at least 10 victims, most too ashamed to come forward. "She's going to get caught," he said. I told him she already had. The truth, once uncovered, doesn't need an audience. It just waits for its moment to be read aloud. The investigation widened quickly once Patricia turned over the files. Federal agents uncovered bank transfers, fake business accounts, and shell properties stretching across 3 states. Each thread led back to Madeline, who had built an empire of deceit using charm and forged signatures. The woman who once wore perfection like perfume was now reduced to a headline: "Real estate broker charged in multi-state fraud scheme." In the courtroom, she looked smaller than I remembered, her posture deflated, her confidence gone. The evidence was relentless documents, testimonies, and the stories of 17 victims whose savings had vanished under her schemes. Daniel sat in the back, silent, watching his former wife dismantled by truth. When the judge read the sentence, 55 years without parole, the room exhaled as one. I was asked if I wanted to speak before sentencing. I stood, hands steady on the railing, and read from a short letter I'd written the night before. "She stole our money," I said, "but not our spirit. She fed on our trust, but left us wiser. And for women like me, Wisdom is wealth that can't be taken again. The words felt like closure, measured and final. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the cold Oregon wind. Reporters shouted questions, but I didn't answer. Justice didn't need commentary, it had already spoken. For the first time in years, I felt light, as though I'd set down a weight I never should have carried. Months after the trial, life began to settle into something quieter, something real. Daniel started a small nonprofit with the money he had left, calling it the Dignity Defense Foundation. Its mission was simple: helping older adults recognize and report financial exploitation before it destroys them. I donated the seed fund but told him the rest had to come from earned trust, not inherited guilt. Tyler switched his college major to law. He said he wanted to specialize in elder protection, that he'd seen enough manipulation to know what justice should look like. Sometimes he'd visit on weekends, sitting on my porch while I brewed us coffee, and we'd talk about what survival teaches a person. He reminded me of the good that had somehow survived all that chaos. Susan, my old friend, and I started a small support group in town. We called it the Dignity Project, a place where people could share their stories without shame. It wasn't grand or famous, but every meeting felt like a small rebellion against the silence that once trapped us. The room filled with women who, like me, I had learned that love doesn't mean funding someone else's comfort. One evening, as we closed up after a session, Susan smiled and said, "You didn't lose a family, Ruth. You built one." I looked around at the women laughing softly, their faces lighter now, and knew she was right. Sometimes losing those who use you is how you finally find those who value you. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord or reminded you of your own battles, share your thoughts. Below your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Until next time, take care of your peace.